Well, welcome back to the Enlightenment, part 2. Hopefully you feel very enlightened at this point. Now we're going to start with neoclassicism in France. So we have moved to the French countryside here. All right, so we're going to be talking about how neoclassicism is happening in France, and we're going to start out with architecture, as you can see here. So if you remember right, we had already talked about Madame de Pompadour. Remember, she was Louis XV mistress. Well, her brother, the Marquis de Maringhy, was appointed Director General of Buildings for Versailles. And so he was in charge of commissions for all the art and buildings there. And so he was kind of the guy in charge. So let's continue on with Versailles. So this was the Petit Trianon by Ng Jacques Gabriel, who was the architect to the king. This was a garden house. Very nice for a garden house, probably nicer than most of our houses, but whatever. So this is the garden house at Versailles that Madame de Pompadour commissioned in 1762. So it's basically a cube that was divided by 5 bays by the Corinthian pilasters, we can see there. We've got the tall rectangular windows, again, very French. And we've got some columns actually going around the sides, as you can see. And remember, these are technically pilasters, and that you can see that it is kind of like a half column that's part of the building there. Plan. This is the Pantheon, formerly known as Saint Genevieve, by Jacques Germain Soufflot. It is a Greek cross plan, and you can see the temple front here, the columns, the pediment. We've got the dome. All of these elements we're kind of used to at this. We've got the facade of the Theatre de l'Ardent there in Paris. So this is a little different, as you can see. We don't have, the typical temple front. We don't have the typical columns. It looks a little different here. So your book likes to call it the sublime and neoclassical. So yeah, just kind of throwing everything at it here. So we've got this kind of unusual atmosphere here. So we've got columns. We don't have the pediment, but we have the frieze. So we have these elements we're used to, but it's a little different. So let's talk about Claude Nicolas Ledoux' entrance to the salt works here at Arc-et-Senans. So again, we have some familiar elements, but they're a little different. So we've got the columns. We're used to seeing columns. Don't have a pediment. We've got the triglyphs, but we don't have anything in between them. So again, we have some elements, but not quite. So this was Ledoux had actually been designing homes before he started designing this. In 1771, he became inspector of the Royal Salt Mine at Chaux in the southeast of France. And that's whenever he kind of got started on working on these buildings. And so we've got these columns. They don't have any fluting. They don't have a base. They don't have really anything to it that we're kind of used to seeing. Here's an interesting one. This is his Etola Customs House. Unfortunately, it's no longer, which is kind of a shame because it's kind of a great building here. So we've got columns, but oh my, there seems to be blocks in the columns, so that's a little weird. We do have a pediment, but nothing in between in there. We don't have a frieze. So again, we have these classical elements, but they seem to be kind of awkward. And this is Ledo's House of the River Authority. So this was a design, never built. It was a design for the ideal city of Seoul. So at this time, we're going to see some utopian ideas here. And so this is one of them. This is the utopian city of Seoul, where each home was created out of simple geometric figures, but it also had to do with one's job. So this was the house of the person who was in charge of the river authority. So of course you have to literally have a river running through it. And so this was a series that he had designed, again, this utopian city of Seoul. Ledo ended up designing over 50 custom houses, or custom houses were kind of these tax gates. This is where they would collect taxes, and these were for surrounding Paris at the time. This is kind of interesting. Again, a design never built. This was Etienne Louis Boulier, project for tomb to Isaac Newton. So this is, again, a design. It was supposed to be a 500-foot high sphere resting in 3 concentric circles. So the idea is that it's a planet tracking 3 orbits. The top quarter of this building had small holes for light to filter in like stars in the night sky. So again, wonderful designs. So let's get back to some paintings. So this is Jean-Baptiste Greuze, The Village Bride, or also known as The Marriage, the moment when a father gives his son-in-law a dowry. So it literally tells us what we're talking about here. So Jean-Baptiste Greuze did a lot of these genre paintings, very much influenced by the Enlightenment ideals, also influenced a lot by Rousseau. And so we've got this this image here where this man's daughter has just gotten married, and he is giving the dowry to his son-in-law. So that's what we have here. He's the son-in-law is grasping the money there. There's the girl. You can see the mom is very emotional about letting her daughter go. She doesn't seem quite as emotional. We've got another sister there. So we've got the whole family kind of gathered about this wedding. But what I really want you to pay attention to is this scene down here. So we actually have this chicken and her chicks down there, and so the idea is that the idea of the children growing up and getting on their own, that is mirrored in the chickens and the chicks down below, just like it is with the people up above. So you will notice this chick is over here. So again, the idea that one's kind of leaving the nest. Jean-Antoine Houdon, Voltaire seated. So Houdon was the son of a concierge at the Royal Academy. And so he grew up in the academy. This is life-size in plaster. His kind of masterpiece was a life-sized flayed male torso. Flayed meaning opened up. So every muscle you could see. And so this was his masterpiece. He specialized in portraits. This particular piece that we're looking at is actually the terracotta cast from the original plaster, which has gotten lost. So we've got Voltaire. He is in this Roman toga and headband in this Roman style chair. So very much, again, emphasizing all the Roman aspects. This is Houdon's George Washington. So by this time, George Washington, he's retired general, but we've got him in his uniform. We have him holding his sword. We've got him in the contrapposto stance. There's that knee popping out. Very much the stately gentleman that we see here. All right, so really one of the epitomes of neoclassical painting is going to be Jacques-Louis David. This is the Oath of the Horatii. It took him 3 years to paint this. This is based on a Roman 7th century BC story. So there was a border dispute between Rome and Alba. And they decided that there had been enough fighting and they were going to settle this with a sword fight. So the 3 Horatii brothers were selected to fight for Rome, and the 3 Curiati brothers were selected to fight for Alba. However, these families had intermarried. So a Horatii sister, Camilla, was engaged to one of the Curiati brothers. One of the Horatii brothers was married to another Curiati sister. So what's happening here is we have this kind of nationalism. We've got these men that are vowing to fight for their country. The Horatii brothers are all, vowing. There's the father here with the swords, and they're vowing. The women, though, they understand what's going on, and they understand that this is going to mean that someone's brother or husband or father of the children, these are not going to come back, that they are going to lose someone they love regardless of the outcome. And so they understand the horror of it all. But it's very much emphasizing not that reality, but the men who are willing to risk their lives, and that the father who is helping them there. David was definitely influenced by Caravaggio. You can see that with the light here. Very much the dramatic tension. This is a huge piece. This is 11 feet high by 14 feet wide. So this is not something you put on your mantelpiece. David was interesting. He ended up becoming the French Republic's Minister of Propaganda during the French Revolution. He ended up closing the French Academy. And we see his politics coming into view with this one, the death of Marat. So Marat, he was the deputy in the National Convention. He was also editor of the populist newspaper L'Ami du Peuple. He was a very ruthless man. And so he was killed. So this is kind of based on reality, but not really. So we're going to talk about the propaganda aspects in a minute. So what happens is a counter-revolutionary from Caen, Charlotte Corday, ended up coming in and stabbing Marat to death while he was in the bathtub. Now, you're saying, why was he Did he just take a bath? No, he actually spent a lot of time in the bathtub. He had this unusual skin condition, so he actually would work in the bathtub. So that part is right. And David was very close to Marat. In fact, he had visited him just the day before he died. So let's go into what's propaganda here. So what's propaganda is, one, this is a very simplistic bathroom. What we have here is we've got a plain wooden box. We've got just some plain blankets, sheets over the bathtub. This is not how his bathtub was. He was a very wealthy man. He had this lavish bathroom. This was not where he spent his time. This is also a very idealized version of him. Remember, he has a skin condition. Do you see a skin condition? No. So we've got this idealized version of him, and we have this bathroom, again, meant to evoke this emotion of, oh, poor him. And so we also have, there's the bloody knife there on the ground, but we see that he still has this quill in his hand. You can see that he's been writing. So the idea is, again, the quill or the pen is mightier than the sword. That idea is there. We also have a Marat and David, of course, his little signature there. So again, this is very much a propaganda piece. But remember, David was Minister of Propaganda for the French Republic, so it makes sense. All right, Marie-Louise Elizabeth Vigie Lebrun, self-portrait with daughter. You're welcome for the exam to just call her Vigie Lebrun. That's her hyphenated last name. Her father was a painter. Unfortunately, he died when she was 12, so she was pretty much a self-taught painter. She began selling portraits in her teens, which technically were legal because she was not licensed from the Royal Academy. She did try to get into the less prestigious Academy of St. Luc. In 1774, she wed Jean-Baptiste Pierre Lebrun, who was a painter and an art dealer. And she ended up becoming court painter to Marie Antoinette. Now, with Marie Antoinette's help, she ended up being accepted into the Royal Academy in 1783 at the age of 28. She ended up becoming one of 4 female members in the Royal Academy. So this is her self-portrait. She has obviously dressed herself in Roman attire with the toga-esque outfit and the headband. So very much kind of in the popular style of the day. We have a very simplistic background, not much of anything. But it does show her and her daughter's connection. This has to do with Rousseau. Rousseau is very much involved in this idea of parents and children in their connections, and parents should be raising their children. Why you say, well, duh. That's kind of a new idea for the aristocracy. So we've had the wealthy have nannies and whatnot, and they've had other people raising their children for a very long time. And so all of a sudden now, the idea of Rousseau is that, oh no, even the wealthy should be raising their children. So this is very much kind of in that style, which she brings to her portraits of Marie Antoinette. Again, she was a court painter to Marie Antoinette. So this is also kind of propaganda in her own way. This is a propaganda piece for Marie Antoinette because, as you are probably somewhat aware, we have a revolution going to happen, 1789 in France. Marie Antoinette, as you probably are aware, not the most popular. So, Vigie Lebrun is trying to portray Antoinette as a mother, as a good mother. This is something that even the poorest women can understand, is motherhood. And so we're portraying her not as this wealthy queen, but as a mother. So we've got her son, Le Dauphin, who's Louis Joseph. He unfortunately dies a couple years later. So that is Louis Joseph. Louis Charles is on her lap. And Marie Therese is over here. And we see an empty cradle. And that's actually very important because she had just lost her daughter, Sophie. Again, something that other mothers could understand, the loss of a child. Now, Marie Antoinette's husband is King Louis the 16th. He ends up becoming deposed in September 21st, 1792. Marie herself, she is the 15th child of the Holy Roman Emperor Francis I and Maria Theresa. Marie Antoinette is executed October 16th, 1793. Now we go to sculpture. Antonio Canova. This is Cupid and Psyche. Now, Canova comes from a family of stonecutters. They end up moving to Venice when he's 9 years old. And his artworks, even as a child, get the attention of a Venetian senator who says he's amazing, he needs to go study sculpture. So sends him to do some studying in Rome and other places. And so he's very much the sculptor of this time period. Now, this particular piece was commissioned by a tourist for his home in Britain. And so Canova would actually work in the plaster. He would design the piece in plaster. Then he would actually have his assistants carve the work out of marble, and then he would actually just do the finishing surface textures, which he is well known for this very smooth, perfect finish, especially of the flesh. But unlike Michelangelo, who's in there chiseling away and doing that hard work, again, Canova does the plaster, has his assistants do the other work, and then he's put the finishing touches on. So this is the moment when Cupid falls in love with the human psyche, and he gives her a kiss to awaken her from eternal sleep. She had been cursed from a jealous Venus previously. With the kiss, she also becomes immortal. So again, we have the classical mythology being portrayed here. And this is a tomb that he worked on, the tomb of the Archduchess Maria Christina in Vienna.